Welcome back, nerds. Look who we're painting today. It's a fierce kitty cat man. So get excited.
Gel candy!
This model was provided by Golden Garbage Studio. More about them later. But right now, Chris shall cast dark sorcery upon his new paint booth, which will extend its life. Do you see this light? Of course you do. Most booths have them. Chris likes to protect his with a powerful shroud of protection known as tape. The procedure is quite complex, so write this down. Take the tape and cover the light. Now just replace that every few months and your light source will remain nice and bright for all eternity. You're welcome. Now, as is tradition, Chris has already prepped and primed the model. He's even taken the unnecessary step of zenithaling it for us. So let's just go over here and paint the face. Starting, as always, with base flesh. Just cover the whole face. And don't worry about any overspray at this point. Then, as is tradition, switch to natural flesh. This you're going to want to keep mostly on upward-facing surfaces. Chris also recommends a light dusting of the front and sides to facilitate blending with the previous tone. Now some highlight skin to highlight the skin. Chris uses this specifically on upward-facing surfaces, top of the nose, cheekbones, that sort of thing. Notice he paints from the direction he assumes light will be coming from. Nice. Now, just one more step. The most unholy step. Jockish vernis. To make this paint, check out JV's recipe video. The link's in the description. Really dilute this. We just want to add a final fleshy undertone. Think of it as a surgically applied glaze. Well, this is awkward. I guess it's time for a new segment. Let's call it Chris fucked that up and now he has to fix it.
Chris just did that wrong. So now it's all fucked up. Now he has to show you how to fix it. He is just a man, a stupid, stupid man.
Moving on. Guess what, nerds? We're doing something new. And it involves static. Electricity. Chris hasn't used this in years, so he will be reading the instructions. And he's gonna need a few more of what diorama enthusiasts call scenics. But before we can start playing with electro-grass, we have to prepare the base. Starting with beige-brown, Chris is gonna sloppily dry brush the whole thing. This will reveal any egregious seams that he will lazily correct. Once that's done, Chris is gonna crudely apply some green to the areas that he expects the electro-grass to go. Notice the gloopy shapes he's painting over? That's technically supposed to be snow. This model is actually part of a set that have a shared environment. Chris did snow in the last video, so if you want to learn how to do that, you're watching the wrong video. If you haven't seen the Omega Red video yet, Firstly, fuck you. Secondly, after this video, go watch it. Anyway, Chris is gonna rock these rocks with some anthracite grey. Some are part of the base, and a bunch of them are separate parts. So he'll paint them all, and then glue them in place before he corrects the painfully obvious seam you've likely been noticing. See it? It's right there. Oh, and there's another one right there. Chris thought you wouldn't notice, so I subtly pointed it out. A few drops of thick superglue and a quick touch-up of the paint is all that's really needed here. It's the back of the model anyway. No one will ever see it, except for stupid-ass Glenn. Fuck you, Glenn. All right. It's that time you've all been waiting for. Prepare yourselves for Electrograss. First, prepare your work surface with a barely adequate tray or pan or something, anything, to keep this powdered outside from getting all over the place. Then simply paint Mod Podge onto the areas where you want the mossy ground cover to stick. Chris isn't quite sure how this'll look. He may hate it and have a big oopsie to contend with. So he's starting on the backside. So any oopsies that can't be corrected are in a place that only bitch-ass Glenn will notice. Chris thinks this looks okay for the first layer of ground cover, so he's gonna cover all the areas he painted green. This is gonna take a while, so while he does that, I will impart upon you some interesting fun facts about this character. Did you know? Sabretooth's legal name is Creed, which is also egotistically the name of his band. They were pretty popular during a period in the 90s when people were experimenting with irony, so there's really no way of knowing if people actually liked their music. They wrote many songs, all of which were considered technically music.
You do 5 days like, yeah.
As you can see, in addition to the fine ground cover, Chris has added some variation with some coarse ground cover and little bits of that craft moss. And please, people, buy this stuff at that old lady store, Michael's. Companies like Army Painter are robbing you. At Michael's, for the same price, you can get 100 times the amount of the exact same thing. Notice Chris is also spritzing his work with alcohol and applying diluted Mod Podge with one of those plastic eyedropper pipette things. The alcohol breaks the surface tension, allowing the glue to flow easier, locking all this down. Once you're done, let it dry overnight, then blow off any loose bits with some canned air or an empty airbrush. Then give it a heavy coat of your favorite brand of Rattle Can Matte Clear. And just like that, you're ready to keep working on it. With the ground cover locked down and dry, we can finally unleash 9 terrifying volts of pure electric fury upon the base. Chris has opted for a 7mm static grass for this. He thinks it'll be an appropriate scale for this model, but who knows? Same as with the ground cover, just apply glue where you want there to be grass. Then take your Electrograss machine and its little ground wire thing. Notice Chris made a little prong thing out of steel wire. Don't use aluminum, it needs to be conductive if you want it to work. Which it'll never work as well as you want it to. Chris actually hates this thing. But anyway, press the probe into the glue, pray for the best, and start shaking the grass all over your model. Do this about 50 times until you stop hating how it looks or are just tired of doing it. And remember to shake off the excess after each pass. Do not try to blow it off. You will have an instinctive, involuntary urge to do that. And unless you enjoy that instantaneous, warm, stabbing feeling of regret, try to avoid doing that. Now, once you're adequately frustrated and disgusted, set this aside to dry overnight and go write a strongly worded letter to the static grass manufacturer and tell them how disappointed you are and accuse them of colluding with the Toledo Painters Guild. then go to bed. You'll feel better in the morning. All right, let's paint this damn costume. But first, we must entomb the face within a protective glob of the fabled silly putty, renowned for its arcane masking properties and rightfully feared by the Toledo Painters Guild. Simply press this polymeric compound of damnation tightly up to the edges of any surface you wish to fortify. It shall stand watchful guardian against any undesirable overspray. For that is its true purpose. Ignore its powerful marketing enchantment, for it is not a mere child's toy meant for ruining carpet. Now we have a choice to make. Sabretooth has had several cool-ass costumes over the years. Do we do this one or this one? Maybe this one. There's so many choices. Chris stared at this picture for quite a while. It's just an inversion of his OG costume, and it's pretty badass. But I think Chris is going to play it safe this time and go classic tradicional. Starting with armor brown, Chris will paint over his pointlessly applied zenithal, fully covering the areas he now wants to be brown. There's no need to worry about overspray on the areas we intend to be yellow. We'll be masking all this in a couple steps. Hold on. We need to talk about this paint booth. First, let's get the pros out of the way. This is the Vigo Star Minimax, and the fan is strong and quiet. The waterfall is fantastic, catches all the particulates. That's why Chris bought it. Now on to its many design flaws. Firstly, it has a motion sensor, which on paper sounds like a cool idea. In practice, however, just using the booth normally triggers all kinds of bizarre behavior, like the fucking thing is haunted. Thankfully, you can disable that feature, thus rendering it actually usable. Secondly, these acrylic shields. This top one has to be folded up if you don't want it in the way of what you're filming, or if you want room to fucking paint for that matter. So you fold it up, and now you need to contort yourself to reach over and around it to reach the buttons. But Chris, maybe that's why there's a motion sensor. Yeah, fuck off. Folding the damn thing up and down triggers the damn motion sensor, so you're just compounding frustration. Thirdly, if the side shields flared out, it would be much more usable and give you a wider working area. Chris might print some angled ones in the future, but for now we're just going to remove all this crap. Fourthly, the placement of this light. This fucking light, it backlights what you're painting, casting shadows on the side you're working on, so that's useless. Finally, this thing took 3 months to deliver. It took half a project to remove and disable 4 of its 6 marketing bullet points, and now it's a pretty damn good little machine, even if it does look like a convection oven in Chris's studio. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program. Where were we? Ah yes, we're painting the costume. Chris is gonna slightly darken this beastly brown with the armor brown he previously applied. This will be his basic highlight for the brown parts of the costume. He is applying this top down to all the upward facing surfaces. This is gonna be subtle, and Chris may choose to dry brush further highlights later, after the yellow parts are painted. Once this is done, he's gonna set these parts aside to dry while he works on Creed's mane or shawl, whatever this furry neck thing is. We're gonna lay down a pretty heavy coat of mahogany ink, completely covering the zenithal that Chris mindlessly painted onto this model before he planned how he would be painting it. Then with a flat brown, he's going to paint the upward-facing surfaces of the shawl thing, effectively repeating the zenithal process, but with appropriate colors. This should look pretty snazzy after a final dry brush pass. Before we attack the yellow parts of the costume, Sabretooth has these sorta elbow teeth, and Chris is just going to take some grey and paint the tips so there's a smooth gradient to black where they meet the gum line of his elbows. Perfect. Time to once again call upon the heretical power of Silly Putty. This time to create an impenetrable barrier of protection upon all the brown parts of the costume. While Chris does this, you should seize this opportunity to like this video. Do that hype thing, whatever that is. And also, for those of you who are handsome, brave geniuses, I invite you to join the Legion. Let us now honor our current roster of brave, handsome genius warriors. Bow your heads. Behold their might, heroes all. And you too can join this kingly alliance. We don't even make you pass the trials of Murlax anymore. Now, you just follow that link. See it? It's right there. Join us in our never-ending battle against the Toledo Painters Guild. All right, let's paint the yellow bits. First, Chris is gonna base everything with this flat brown. Just cover it all. We just want to tone down the existing shadows from the zenithal. Then for the middle value, Chris is going to use this aptly named middle stone. For this, Chris is trying to get good solid coverage on the upward and front-facing surfaces while preserving a bit of that flat brown on the undersides. Then for the basic highlight, Chris is going to use this interior yellow and rebelliously apply it to the exterior of the costume. We're going to focus solely on the upward-facing surfaces. This costume has a lot of cool texture, and a couple dry brush passes are going to make that stuff pop. Hopefully. All right, nerds, once again, bear witness to the true power of Silly Putty. This unassuming red egg indeed contains the pure essence of masking perfection. The chosen ones, those who dare to wield this unholy tempest, are the greatest threat to the Toledo Painters Guild's domination. For it is written that the great heretics shall one day stand victorious upon the smoldering ashes of their dying order. We're on the home stretch. Chris is gonna aggressively apply some highlights to the shawl using aged white. He wants to lighten this quite a bit, but keep that nice contrast in the recesses. Now with base flesh, he's gonna apply some highlights to the brown parts of the costume. Use a very dry brush and focus on the upward-facing high spots. Apply this the same way you would imagine Glenn creepily touching a woman's hand. Gross. Now with moon yellow, repeat the bad touch Glenn technique on all the yellow parts. Chris isn't doing this to add additional highlights. He just thinks the yellow is a smidge too muted, so he's adding back a little saturation, but just to the high spots. He doesn't want it cartoon-ass yellow, but this is too beige. Once this is done, Chris is gonna top coat these parts with a gloss clear to prepare them for the next step. Welcome to the next step. Now we're going to use the best tool with the worst goddamn applicator ever conceived by mortal men to add some contrast to all these stitches and recessed details. This is why we used a gloss top coat. It improves the capillary action of the panel liner, allowing it to just magically flow into all these recesses. Tamiya panel liner comes in a few colors. This brown is pretty subtle, and Chris is going to use it on the almost sarcastic amount of stitches on this model, just to pop them out so they read a little better. Now you may be noticing the stitches where the brown and yellow parts of the costume meet and how gross they look. Well, bear witness to this forbidden technique. Using the power of contrast paint, a couple coats directly onto the stitches will smooth that transition, hiding the previously masked edge while simultaneously adding contrast to the raised stitches. It's a twofer, and it's lazy. Most importantly, it works. But most importantly, the Toledo Painters Guild hates it. As with all the forbidden techniques chronicled within the Tome of Heresies, Chris encourages you to harness the power of this unsanctioned Class II heresy. Use it freely and often. This is a great time to mention the makers of this model, Golden Garbage Studio. They just started a Patreon, which you can find linked in the description. But additionally, Chris normally hollows and supports everything he prints manually because, well, many pre-supported files just suck. Anyway, he reluctantly printed this model using the pre-supported files. And well, he was so fucking impressed, he needed to find this artisan, this craftsman, this Runkelstiltskin. This lunatic sorcerer has mastered supports. Everything is intelligently oriented, the most optimized supports we've ever seen. They were quite literally perfect. Not a single visible scar on the model. My understanding is he also pre-supports the files of friends of this channel, Zez Studios. He uses a tool called Rune Brace. If this guy did the supports on a model, you should be saying so. That's a selling point. All right, once these details on the costume are done, hit the parts with another top coat, this time matte clear. This is it. All that's left is the head. First, Chris has to paint the forehead mask, and you all know how Chris just loves masks that don't give two shits about concealing a person's identity. Now with Reichland Flesh Shade, Chris is gonna add some definition around the eyes. He's going light here and depositing it directly into the wrinkles and recesses. You don't want a big pool of this stuff. Then it's time for the eyes themselves. First, paint the eyeballs black. Chris is being careful to also paint the upper and lower edge of each eyelid while avoiding the eyelid itself. This will act as an outline for the eyeball, but not look like mascara. Man, Creed is squinty. Now, for the sclera. Using deck tan, Chris will carefully try to paint just the eyeball, leaving the thinnest black outline. I think this is the third model in a row that has no irises or pupils to deal with. Chris assures me it isn't laziness, but, well, I have my doubts. You have to agree it's a pretty suspicious pattern. Anyway, time to turn our attention to the mouth. Starting with Grimoire Purple and a little bit of Jorkish Vermis, we're just gonna slop this all over the inner mouth and gums. This model comes with a variety of heads. Conveniently, the one Chris chose has the lower mouth modeled as a separate part, which, since it's an open mouth with fangs, there won't be any supports in the mouth to contend with, and it makes painting it as easy as the closed mouth variants. Now for the teeth, Chris is going to use deck tan and paint each tooth individually. Once these dry, put a little gloss clear on them, and the mouth will look extra mouthy. Now while that dries, let's quickly paint the Wolverine metal, adamantium, onto the claws. We're just going to use liquid chrome for this. Then all that's left is Creed's hair, which we're going to base with ochre brown. Get good coverage, then once it's dry, add the shade. Chris is going to use Skeleton Horde. This is a contrast paint, so it'll naturally collect and be darker in the recesses, leaving us with the perfect surface for dry brushing the highlights, which we will quickly apply using Iraqi sand. All right, guys, I think it's done. Behold! All right, I'm gonna go now. Subscribe. Fuckers!
Hey, congrats on your nerd channel, Chris. You nerd.